Hi, this is Chris Gibson, and I'll be narrating Chapter 4, The Writing Process, Outlining. What is outlining? Outlining is the roadmap for the essay. American writer Tom Wolfe said, "By writing an outline, you are really writing in a way, because you're creating the structure of what you're going to do. Once I really know what I'm going to write, I don't find the actual writing takes all that long." Critical thinkers use outlines to organize their ideas and check the organization of their drafts throughout the writing process. Outlines represent an important element of the writing process, not only for English essays, but also for essays in history, philosophy, economics, political science, etc. As the roadmap of the essay, outlines should do the following: provide the thesis and most important details of the essay. Demonstrate a clear, logical organization of main ideas and supporting details. Should not include every sentence in the essay or paragraphs. Why outline? Just like we need a roadmap when traveling to an unfamiliar destination, good writers create preliminary or rough outlines after they have generated enough ideas through pre-writing to organize and develop their essays. Strong, thorough pre-writing should develop more ideas than you can actually use in your essay, so that you are able to select the most relevant and convincing ideas for your essay. Once you have settled on a thesis statement and your main supporting ideas, you can write a formal outline, creating the skeleton of your essay. Looking at your ideas this way can help ensure that your main points are on topic and directly support your thesis. Your main points are logically organized. Your most important ideas are emphasized, and your less important ideas are subordinated. Your main points have sufficient and relevant supporting evidence. Outlines also help writers make the writing process easier since you have a roadmap for your essay to follow. Break through writer's block. For people who struggle with writer's block, it also helps to set writing and structure on paper with lower stakes. Save time writing your essay since you have a clear, focused plan to follow. Ensure each part of your essay relates to the essay prompt. How do I do it? Put the thesis statement at the top. It should be polished and be a complete sentence. Use Roman numerals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. to indicate the main points, topic sentences, which should be written in specific phrases or complete sentences. This is the P or point of pi. Use capital letters A, B, C, D, E, etc. for the major supporting details. Typically, writers should have at least two main supporting details for each point or topic sentence. The I or information of pi providing evidence, and the E or explanation of pi providing analysis. Use numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. for sub-details clarifying and specifying your main supporting details. Outline organization. When deciding how to order your points, your first consideration should be logic. How does one point lead up to or build upon another? Here are some different ways to logically organize your points. Climax. Present your ideas so they build to a climax, ending with your most dramatic examples. Complexity. Start with simpler ideas and build to more complex ones. Familiarity. Start with more familiar ideas and move towards newer ones. Audience appeal. Start with safe ideas and move to more challenging ones. Chronological. Present ideas in the time order in which they occurred. Compare or contrast. When looking at similarities or differences, it may be ordered in one of two ways. Block style. Look first at one item and then the next, using the same criteria each time. Point by point. Look at the two items simultaneously, comparing them on the same criteria. Practice. Here is a template to help you on the first step towards making a formal outline. Adjust for how many body paragraphs you decide to include. The number of body paragraphs you want to include in an essay is generally based on the scope of your thesis and the required length of the essay. Thesis. What do you want to convince your reader of? Is this an arguable assertion? Is this based on the reading? Can one disagree? Paragraph 1. Topic sentence. What is an arguable point I can make to prove my thesis? Support. What examples and quotes in the reading can I use to prove the claim in my topic sentence? Do I want to also include real-life examples or research to strengthen my claim? Relevance. Why do I think this is important? What can be learned from this? What are the implications, outcomes, possible interpretations, or deeper meaning? Follow the same format for each body paragraph. Conclusion. How can I end the essay on a strong note? What would be a good so what that explains, so what can we learn from this? So what is the larger significance or impact? Example. Here is an example using the template. Thesis. Slaves like Douglas were controlled by not being able to read and write, and this denial of education is still happening in the United States as well as other parts of the world. Paragraph 1. Topic sentence. Slave owners would not allow slaves to learn to read and write because they were afraid they would rebel. Support. From text. Mr. and Mrs. Hugh forbid Douglas to learn to read and write. Mrs. Hugh became furious if she would ever see him holding the paper. Outside research. See if there were actual laws passed making it illegal to teach slaves to read and write. Relevance. If you can't read, you won't know the laws that govern you, so you won't know your rights. Also, you can't get a clear historical perspective, so can't know what is just and reasonable and what is not. Paragraph 2. Topic sentence. Learning to read caused Douglas unexpected pain as he better understood his own enslavement, but it also set in motion his desire to create change and bring awareness to end slavery. Support. From the text. Douglas speaks of his unutterable anguish and how reading became a curse and that he wished he could return to the stupidity of his fellow slaves. Outside research. Research what Douglas later did after he escaped to the North and became an activist. Relevance. Being able to read and write gives you the tools to call out oppression, gather other people to support making needed changes, and to liberate yourself and others from unfair institutions. Paragraph 3. Topic sentence. Denying people equal access to education is happening today in places like rural Pakistan in the case of women. Outside research. Mukhtar Mai, in her memoir, In the Name of Honor, tells how women in her region were not allowed to be educated, so when she was gang raped, she could not write down her account at the police station, so her story was changed and she lost her case in court. Later, she learned to read and write and became a strong advocate for women's rights and started a school for girls in her village. Quote on poor treatment of women. Relevance. Becoming literate helped Mai navigate the complex legal systems, bring international awareness of the plight of women in her region, and enable her to help others. Conclusion. So what? The denying of certain groups and education didn't just happen long ago or far away. It is happening now in the United States with our inner city schools, which are underfunded and understaffed. With the high dropout rates, large numbers of blacks and Latinos are being denied equal access to education and literacy. Sample outline on Chapter 7, Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass. Thesis. The control and limitations over reading and writing during slavery sought to make slaves like Douglass ignorant, powerless, and therefore more easily controlled. And this control over literacy and education is still happening in the world today. Introduction. Lead in with George Orwell quote, "Who controls the past controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past." Compare to the band Rage Against the Machine and how they used Orwell's warning. Connect discussion of control to Frederick Douglass and controlling slaves through denying them an education. State thesis. Roman numeral 2. In his narrative, Douglass exposes how being denied education was one of the main tactics used to keep so many blacks trapped within generations of enslavement. Mr. and Mrs. Hugh forbid Douglass from learning to read and write. Mrs. Hugh became furious anytime she would catch Douglass reading. Shows the realization that educated people are harder to control. Many slave states passed laws making it illegal to teach slaves to read and write. Quote, North Carolina law and list the punishments for breaking the law. shows how to control people. You have to not just physically, but mentally do so. Roman numeral 3. Douglas discovered that freeing his mind led to anguish, torment, as he was unable to free himself from the entrenched institutions of slavery, but change was set in motion. Being awakened to the stark realities of his condition served to plunge Douglas into despair. Quote, showing how Master Hugh knew discontent would follow. Quote, showing Douglas's anguish and despair as his eyes are opened. Discussion of how ignorance is not bliss. Those who are ignorant get taken advantage of. They are powerless, are controlled by others. Douglas eventually gains power over his life from learning to read and becomes an activist fighting for the equality of blacks and women. Roman numeral 4. Unfortunately, when slavery was abolished in 1865, that did not end the practice of denying certain groups of people an education in order to control them. But it also did not end people's ability to go against societal norms, educate themselves, and fight for change. Mukhtar Mai, a poor rural woman in Pakistan, tells in her memoir, In the Name of Honor, how she was denied an education, so when she was brutalized, she was helpless in the legal system. Mai learned to read and write, pursued her attackers legally, brought national awareness to the plight of women in her country, started a school for girls, and also an organization that advocates for the rights of women. Conclusion. Denial of education is happening now and closer to home in the U.S. as inner city schools are underfunded and understaffed, so many of our youth are dropping out and are not given access to an equal education, and this puts them in a powerless and invisible state. How can I check an outline? Outline peer response. Answer questions like the following to evaluate your peer's outline as well as your own. Number 1, thesis. Does the thesis make a statement that can be argued? Ask yourself, can I disagree? If you cannot disagree, if the thesis just states a fact or what is already obvious and known, advise the author about how to add an opinion. Is the thesis specific, focused, and clear enough? Is the thesis based on the reading? Also, is there a clear so what? So what is important about this? So what is the significance? Number 2, supporting points. Does the outline list the supporting points in a clear and logical order? How can the order be clearer or improved? Does each supporting point directly prove the thesis? Are there any additional supporting points that should be included? Number 3, evidence. Is there a clear example illustrating each of the supporting points? Is the author using examples from the reading? If not, suggest ideas the author could use to better prove his or her points. Could the author improve or replace any of the supporting points or textual examples? Has the author developed a clear explanation of why each supporting point is relevant? Practice. Using the guiding questions on the outline peer review response, provide constructive feedback on this outline on Chapter 7 in Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass. Thesis feedback. This statement is very general. Whose lives exactly were damaged? How? So what? I like the idea of including statistics, but how does this connect to the argument about being damaged? This entire second point summarizes how Douglas learned to read, but it's not clear how this connects to the argument about people being damaged by slavery. I'd remove this. Good. Section 3 directly connects to your thesis about being damaged by slavery. The topic sentence is a bit general though. How did it change people, for better or worse? Then you show how Douglas and Mrs. Hugh were damaged, but I think you could include a separate, more developed section for each and include quotes from the text too. You could also include your own analysis of why it's important to see how these two were changed. So what does this reveal? It's good you stay on topic, but this just repeats your thesis. In your conclusion, you want a larger so what. So what can we learn by realizing that both the enslaved and the enslavers were hurt by slavery? Can we apply this lesson elsewhere? Is this a danger now in a less obvious form that we should be concerned about? Are those who have unchecked power over others always harmed by it? Here is a potential revision of the outline based on the feedback received. Originally, the thesis said slavery damaged many lives. Now it states who, slaves and slave owners, how, damaged psyches and destroyed humanity, and so what, unchecked power corrupts. The reasoning behind the statistics is now clearly connected to the damage caused. Then, adding the corrupting influence of power now introduces the second part of the thesis about slave owners being corrupted too. And now the order has been changed to talk about Douglas first, the obvious one damaged, and then the less obvious, the slave owners. More detailed quotes and so what analysis has been added to the discussions of Douglas and Mrs. Hugh. A larger so what has been added looking at how this lesson can be applied today. That concludes Chapter 4, the writing process, outlining.